One of the things that I'm doing is I'm reading all of Stephen King's books in order. I've been doing it for a while. I picked up the pace this year and even had a plan to finish all the books by the end of the year. That's not going to happen. I still got about 27 books left to read. As of the time I'm recording this, I'm currently on the short story collection Everything's Eventual, which I really enjoyed, and I'm enjoying even more as I'm reading it again. But before and after each book, I write a before post and an after post. And so I write about, in the before post, I'll typically just talk about what the book meant to me, what I was doing the first time I read it. In the after post, the entire time I'm reading, I'll be taking notes, and I'll kind of organize those notes into I guess you could call it a review, although I'm not really talking about whether the books are great or terrible most of the time. Sometimes I'll express, if I really liked a story or if it didn't really connect with me, or if I had a different reaction the second time than the first time. And then, of course, there's a few stories that I'm reading for the first time, and so my reactions are from the first read, of course. This was after Black House. There's two novels that Stephen King wrote with Peter Straub. The first was The Talisman, which I read a while ago. It came out in the 80s. And then Black House came out in the early 2000s and was the sequel. After Black House, Stephen King revisited. All right, by J. Wilburn. The plan is to reread all of Stephen King's works in the order they were published. Richard Chismar of Cemetery Dance had the vision. I'm doing it because I'm a writer and I want to improve my fiction. And I love Stephen King's stories. I think there is something to be learned through this process. You can also go back to the beginning and read Before Carrie or any of my other posts up through this one and beyond by checking out this link to the master list of all my Stephen King revisited posts. I can click on that as we go through. All right. This is Black House by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Right here, right now. Quote from the book. All right. Black House has an interesting narrative style that from co-authors Stephen King and Peter Straub in this 21st century sequel to 1984's The Talisman. I've linked the books there for people that want to check those out if you haven't already. Like a guided tour setting the scene, literally pointing out sights and then moving us along. Remember Amy, we are told. We'll come back here, the narrators tell us. Let's park up here on the windowsill between this and that to watch this scene play out. It really was kind of a strange narrative style, first person, and sort of talking to the audience in a way that was different. I think it may have been a little too clever by half, maybe. We go through many pages like this introducing characters and background. Too much time is spent on a DJ setup and other scenes as well. This second person plural present tense style took some getting used to. It still jarred me out of the story from time to time, even in the later sections of the story when I was mostly used to it. The Crimson King, Ram Abala to some, and the Dark Tower mythology loom large in this novel. When King and Straub invented the territories for the Talisman a couple decades earlier, the Dark Tower series was still one book. King had not linked this shared world of the Talisman into his Tower multiverse. Here in Black House, Jack Sawyer's continued adventure becomes a Dark Tower deep cut. It joins Insomnia and Hearts in Atlantis as essential reading for Dark Tower lore and for understanding the Breakers. We get big information dumps about Roland, his new gunslingers, and the nature of his mission and enemies. It turns out all telekinetics seem to come from Earth. There are mentions of monorails, the third mono in Endworld, and the head breaker and his many escapes from Hearts in Atlantis. And the fisherman lives there like a cancer cell lives in a healthy organism. This is a 2001 release. The band Korn is mentioned. The Scream movies are referenced along with Wes Craven and an inference to I Know What You Did Last Summer. Mark McGuire's Home Runs and Harry Potter's Magic are referenced. Rush Limbaugh broadcasts into the talk stations in the radio station that's in the story. Kids are playing with magic cards. A character flips open a Nokia. The Blair Witch Project is referenced. It's also beautifully in the early 2000s. A black house, faded to gray, fools us into thinking maybe this place is less than it actually turns out to be. There is slippage between worlds, between territories, and big things happen when there is slippage. Approaching the black house comes at a great cost. Jack Sawyer grew up to be a really intuitive cop. He retains the power of that which he touched, but has lost his memory of earlier events until he needs to be reawakened. Jack is plagued by waking dreams, robin's eggs, and feathers appearing where they do not belong. The town is plagued by a child killer and worse. The talisman is also called the Globe of Forever, we learn. Cops see everyone as guilty. Jack laments. Dread set to music is a good phrase. Dripping poison into the porches of her ears is a good turn of phrase. It was the first time I'd heard that, so I wrote it down. While good takes a long time to develop, evil has a way of popping up full-blown and ready-made. That's a powerful line. I thought it was really good. Shines murder bright is a great description of light reflecting off the gun. I am certain that I'm going to use that as a story title or use it in some way. The smell of blood was like laughter. This is supposedly a quote from somewhere else, but I can't find it. It's an interesting line either way. He could not remember the face of his father, not clearly, as a line thrown in offhandedly, but to great effect. That's important in the Dark Tower mythology, but it's just kind of thrown in as an aside here. So it's kind of a clever nod to people who are really following those books. The story will hinge on three characters, with traveling Jack, a distraught mother, and an intermittently senile patient. A biker gang with hearts and minds of gold, along with a blind man who sees more than anyone, will be vital too. The mother-wife character is praised in the narrative until she and a counterpart rise to sort of Mary Jane levels, that idea of an unflawed character. Jack may be the same way with his touched life. The fog rolls in during a crucial scene. If he's out there, he can do whatever he wishes, the sheriff says. The little sisters are vampires living in a hospital tent, and their patients never get better. I'm actually reading Everything's Eventual, and the little sisters appear in a short story. It's kind of a long short story in Everything's Eventual that takes us back to Roland the Gunslinger. Somehow I think I missed that story the first time I was reading through, but it was kind of cool to read this in Black House, and then go straight into that short story collection and get the background on these vampires that were just mentioned in passing. Mr. M's accent is very hard to read, spelled out phonetically. It was to the point that I wanted to skip his lines and hope nothing important was being said. This was another broken rule from King's own instructions on writing about overusing accents and dialects to the point of distraction from the story. In dialogue, King writes pictures as pictures. I think he's trying to do like a phonetic thing, but I don't know what the point of that is. Fuckero is a new word that has popped up in King's last few books leading into Black House. The Wallflowers, the band, play a lot in Stephen King's novels. Elsewhere, in a discussion of 11/22/63, King says his son Joe Hill suggested the word obdurate to describe the resistance of time to change. King has been using that word in all his various forms throughout his writing career, including in this novel. He uses that word a lot. The indulgent, self-referencing narrative style lays in heavy again near the end of the novel, in the midst of the final battleground. The co-authors directly self-reference at the end. It's well-written prose, but the sort of stuff that lesser men might be talked into cutting from the final work, and probably for the better. Black House was more narratively cohesive than The Talisman, the book that preceded it, but it still drifts a bit. Skip the payoffs to a couple narrative setups. It lingered in places and then rushed forward in others. The ending is solid in this one. The authors offer, you can stop reading here, but if you keep going, you're not going to like what happens next. It was in many ways one of King's better endings. The story and characters hold together well. I would not put it in the top of King's books, but I would exclude it from any list of his books I liked the least. The next post in the series will be Before Everything's Eventual, which will be linked on the master list of all my Stephen King Revisited posts. I've actually put that one up already because I'm in the middle of Everything's Eventual at this point. So you look through the list and you can see Before Carrie, After Carrie, Before Dead Zone, After Dead Zone. So it's all of Stephen King's books that I've already read, and then the ones I still have left, all the way up to If It Bleeds is out now, and then Later by Stephen King is in the works and supposedly coming out in 2021. So that's what we got coming up next.